Hello Pokemon fans, I'm Professor K.
And I'm Ed.
And today we're going to bring you a deck profile video. It's been a little while since we've done one of these, so I figured I would profile a deck that's actually been requested quite a few times and I just haven't gotten around to it. And that deck is going to be Politoed. So, without further ado, let's take a look here to see how this deck runs. Now, it's a kind of deck that where I feel like it has potential, but it falls just a little bit short, just like Altaria Garchomp earlier in the metagame of last season, 2014. Here's where I stand on Politoed. I'll show you my build. Here we run 4 Poliwag. Got 4 Poliwhirl.
Swirly.
Now, the main reason we have Poliwhirl is for its second attack, Finishing Blow. If your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage on it, then it does 50 more. Now, given that it's all colorless, with Politoed, that attack would be free. That's the main reason why this deck works. So we run 4 of those because that really is going to be our main attacker. In order to attack for free, we're going to need 3 Politoed.
Politoed looks so weird. I mean, a green frog? Just weird.
A green frog. Isn't frogs green?
Not in the Pokemon world.
Well, true. So anyways, this Politoed here has the ability King Song. Ignore all colorless energy in the attack cost of each of your Poliwag, Poliwhirl, and Poliwrath's attacks. So, being able to ignore all your colorless attacks allows Poliwhirl here to use Finishing Blow for free. That's 50 damage and 50 more if there's any damage on it. So, if you get out this Politoed, you can attack for free and be able to do damage even further by evolving into Poliwrath. Now there are 2 Poliwrath in this deck, 3 Politoed, 4 Poliwhirl, 4 Poliwag. This entire lineup takes 13 spaces in the deck. It is a very large line. Poliwhirl's attack, Poliwrath's attack here is Steamroll. It does 60 damage to the active and 30 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So you can use this attack for free as well with Politoed over there. Now the only thing is I'm not a huge fan of using that Steamroll attack just because it is 60 to the active and 30 to the bench. I feel like 100 for free is better than this. But there's a way to get around that. And you will see that here in a second. But first, I want to explain how we're going to get the damage moved around. The way we're going to do that is with Duskull and Dusknoir here. Now of course Duskull is the first Pokemon in the lineup, and the second one is going to be Dusknoir with the ability Sinister Hand.
They look pretty.
Yes, the 2 shiny Dusknoir. I love these things. As often as you like, during your turn, before you attack, you may move 1 damage counter from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another one of them. So you can move around damage counters across the board. If you get 10 damage on every one of your opponent's Pokemon, you can then take Poliwhirl here and attack for free if you have Politoed on the bench with Finishing Blow and hit for 100 damage. So that is really good if you can get it to work. Now that's a big if, because it is difficult to get this deck up and running. It does take a little bit of time. But to help some of this out, considering that you do want to evolve into Poliwrath for the larger health, we run a single copy of Celebi EX, just for its ability Time Recall. Each of your evolved Pokemon can use any attack from its previous evolution, as long as the necessary energy is attached. In this case, we don't even need energy, as long as we have Politoed on the bench. So, we'll use Time Recall to attack with Poliwrath, who has 140 HP, but we can use Poliwhirl's attack, Finishing Blow, for free.
The one instance where not using a rare candy would come in handy.
Exactly, because if you use a rare candy, you can't use Poliwhirl's attacks if you go straight from Poliwag to Poliwrath. You can't do it unless the card is actually attached. So,
but I gotta say quickly, Celebi EX has never really been popular when it first came out, but now, with all these evolutions going on, Megas and all that, Celebi EX is starting to make a comeback.
Yeah,
big time.
The metagame was ruled by basics last season, and it's gonna start coming around to where evolutions are stepping back in again. But until that happens, one way to stall to be able to set up this deck is to run a single copy of Suicune. Suicune is a card that pretty much everybody knows by now with the ability Safeguard. Each of your opponent's Pokemon EX cannot harm Suicune with any damage whatsoever. Still can be affected by Hypnotoxic Laser and stuff like that, but anything that a Pokemon EX tries to do to Suicune gets blocked. So this can actually stall for some time and allow you to set up this deck. So we have the Tech Suicune over there. Now, one more Pokemon that we have in here, because we've got to have somebody who can take a hit and dish it out fairly easily, is to run Mewtwo. 2 copies of Mewtwo EX.
Can never go wrong with Mewtwo.
Nope. That first attack, X-Ball, does 20 damage for each energy attached to your Pokemon and your opponent's Pokemon. So all you have to do is attach a double colorless here, and you're able to start hitting for 40 damage immediately, and even more if your opponent has energy attached to them. So this is a very good card to have, especially in a deck like this that doesn't require a lot of energy to run. Let's take a look at the supporter line. The supporter line is pretty straightforward. It's the basic supporter line that I like to run in most decks. Colress is a card that I'm a big fan of, especially in this kind of a deck where you have a lot of Pokemon. As you can see, I mean, we have 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. There's 21 Pokemon in this deck. So a card like Colress is a good card to have because you are going to fill up your bench. And more times than not, your opponent's going to have at least 2 to 4, sometimes even 5 Pokemon on the bench themselves. So this is a very good draw support card in a deck such as this. Now, we also have 3 copies of N. N, just a standard card pretty much in every deck these days.
Very pretty.
Each player shuffles his or her hand into their deck and draws as many cards as they have prizes left. Very straightforward. Everybody knows that by now what N does. It's a powerful card in the beginning of the game for you, and also a powerful card in the end game if you have less prizes than your opponent, because it leaves them with a small hand.
So why, thank you very much, Professor.
Yes, N does do a very good job.
He does.
Yep. So, also, the best draw supporter in the game, Professor Juniper. The only downside to Juniper is that you have to discard your hand in order to draw a fresh 7. But regardless, it is a guaranteed 7 cards. So it is important to note that when you need cards, this is your best bet most of the time. Unless you've got a big bench, and then of course Colress is the better card when you can draw up to 10. So there's 3 Juniper, 3 N, 3 Colress, and 3 Skyla. In a deck that's required to set up like this, you need a lot of item cards, and this will help you get them. Also, your Stadium and your supporters are eligible as well, but most of the time you want to use a Skyla to get an item card, sometimes a Stadium, but hardly ever a supporter. So 3 of those is pretty basic in this kind of a deck that requires as high of an item count as you are going to be seeing here shortly. Now, I also have 2 copies of Pokemon Fan Club. I cannot stress to you how important it is to keep the lines of Poliwag over here up and running and constantly flowing. So a card like this, with Level Ball being gone, is a pretty decent fill-in for that. You do have to use your supporter for the turn, but you do get 2 basic Pokemon to put out onto the bench. So if you don't have a draw support card in your hand and you need Pokemon, this is your go-to right here.
Absolutely.
So there's your Pokemon Fan Club. And then of course, what's become a staple in pretty much every deck now that catcher is a flip is Lysander. And in this deck, we run 2 copies, mainly just to make sure that whatever we want to get into the active slot gets into the active slot, regardless of how the game goes, even if it's just to stall so we can set up a little bit further. So there's 2 copies of Lysander there.
That Lysander, don't take no for an answer, boy.
Nope, you gotta do what it says. So in a deck like this, where we're running pretty much non-EX Pokemon for the most part, we've got Poliwag with 60 HP, Poliwhirl with 80, Politoed with 130, and Poliwrath with 140. It just makes sense here to run the Stadium card, Training Center. Now, Training Center allows each of your Stage 1 and Stage 2 Pokemon to get an additional 30 HP while this is in play. So now you're taking Poliwrath from 140 HP all the way up to 170 HP, making it essentially a non-EX Pokemon with EX potential in the HP department. 170 HP for a non-EX Pokemon is huge. Politoed goes to 160, Poliwhirl becomes a respectable 110, which matches Pyroar. So that's also really good. Your Dusknoir makes it up to 160 as well. So it makes it a lot harder for them to knock out the Pokemon that you've got if you have Training Center. So there is your Stadium for the deck. Now,
just hope your opponent doesn't run any Stage 1 or Stage 2s either.
Yeah, it helps them as well. I mean, Stadium cards benefit both sides of the board, so regardless of what you do, you've got to be careful. Alright, now, obviously we want to get from Poliwag to Politoed as fast as possible, so we have 3 copies of Rare Candy. Rare Candy allows you to skip your Stage 1, go straight from a basic to a Stage 2. Straightforward in all evolutionary decks that have stage 2 Pokemon. Very important to have. So we have 3 rare candy because we don't always want to use rare candy. Sometimes we want to use Evosoda or just evolve naturally, considering that we need Poliwhirl for a main attacker, and you can't do it unless he's underneath. So there's your rare candy. And also it makes sense in a deck that you have no energy cost for the most part, except for Mewtwo over there. Suicune is just kind of a tech. He's more or less just to take up space and stall for you, and basically to be a sacrifice. But in a deck that requires a little energy like this, it only makes sense to run 3 copies of Max Potion. Now unfortunately I don't have the 3rd shiny one, but I do have 2, so there you go.
Oh well, there is a limit to how much you can show off.
There is a limitation. I only have 2 Max Potions that are shiny, but they all do the same thing regardless. You can heal all damage from one of your Pokemon and discard all energy. Well, when we're attacking for free, there's no need for energy, so it's a free full heal card. Very cool, very important to have in a deck such as this.
Technically it's not full heal.
I'm saying you heal fully though. Not saying it's a full heal, you heal fully. Alright, so moving on in the item cards. Only makes sense to add damage as much as possible like any other deck and use 3 copies of Muscle Band, which allows you to attack for 20 more damage regardless of who you're attacking or what you're attacking. You will always do 20 more damage as long as this tool card is attached. Straightforward, important in just about every deck that wants to do any damage whatsoever. Now, as I said, it's very important to get the Poliwhirl out, so we run 3 copies of Evosoda. Now, I believe that you could probably drop this count down to 2, but this just adds a level of consistency to the deck that I just find to be a little bit more comfortable when you're trying to get out as many Poliwhirl as you possibly can, and eventually Poliwrath or Politoed regardless. So Evosoda is important for that reason. And I feel that 3 is good, 2 is probably manageable for if you want room for something else. Now since we have 2 copies of Pokemon Fan Club, your basics are pretty much covered, but we still run 2 copies of Ultra Ball. You could substitute out one of these Evosodas for another Ultra Ball, but you don't want to discard a lot in this deck. So I think the 2 copies of Ultra Ball is enough, considering that there's not very much you're going to want to throw out. It's a very tightly packed deck because of how many Pokemon there are. So there's your 2 copies of Ultra Ball. Now we got to have switching cards, of course, to get out of the active position, mainly to get Suicune out if it's all possible, or if you're stuck in the active spot with a Pokemon that you just don't want to have there, you've got to have a way to get out. So Escape Rope allows you to switch out your active Pokemon and forces your opponent to switch out their active Pokemon as well. You get to sit back and watch your opponent switch out what they're going to switch in first and allow you to make the decision next. And then of course we have the basic switch card, which allows you to get out of the active position and switch it out with something that's onto your bench. And your opponent does nothing, obviously. It doesn't work the same as Escape Rope in that sense, but either way, it allows you to get yourself up and out of the active position. And finally, we have 1 copy of Startling Megaphone. I feel like 2 copies would probably be a little bit better in this deck. Like I said, you could switch out an Evosoda for either another Ultra Ball or another Megaphone. I've gone the more consistent route because Garbodor really hasn't been a thing for me. 1 copy seemed to work okay, but if your area has a metagame that's full of Garbodor, you can switch out for 2 copies of Startling Megaphone.
Yeah, because Garbodor is usually bad, but against this, you're powerless.
Yes, I mean, you've got King Song that allows you to attack for free. You've got Dust Noir to be able to move damage around. You've got Time Recall on Celebi to be able to attack with previous evolutions attacks. And you've got Suicune over there with Safeguard to block all of your EX Pokemon, your opponent's EX Pokemon's attacks. So it is important to make sure that if you're in a metagame full of Garbodor, that you have enough resources to discard their tool cards and shut down any kind of threat from Garbodor entirely. And in a deck like this where you don't require energy, we only run 4 copies of Double Colorless. This is strictly for Mewtwo, because Mewtwo doesn't get to attack for free. So we have 4 copies here just to pile onto Mewtwo and deal tons and tons of damage with that big Pokemon EX. So there you have it, guys. There's your full and complete deck laid out on the mat right there in front of you. This is Politoed, and hope you guys can get some appreciation out of this, maybe use it and see what you guys think of it. Personally, I think that it falls just a little bit short of being competitive, considering that your main attacker is going to be this stage 1, and you do need it sometimes to evolve into either one of these 2. If you don't get Celebi out, then you really can't take advantage of the fact of evolving into Poliwrath, and it just kind of makes it a little bit difficult. If you can't get Dust Noir out, you can't get the damage moved around, it falls pretty quickly to some of the major decks out there.
Ribbit.
Because, what?
Ribbit.
Why Ribbit?
Because they're frogs.
Oh.
Politoed.
Okay.
Sorry.
Alright, just came out of nowhere. I didn't know. Anyways, like I was saying, yeah, this deck can fall victim to a lot of bigger decks out there that can knock them out quickly, especially if you can't get your Poliwag evolved immediately. So there's a high risk, high reward kind of situation with this kind of deck, and it's just one that I don't feel like is going to be ultra competitive, but at the very least, it's a lot of fun to play. I had a good time with it, and I'm sure that you will too. Hopefully you guys enjoy this build, tweak it a little bit and make it your own, and hope you guys appreciate it. So, as always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you guys enjoyed it, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and we'll always have more Pokemon content for you guys, trying to bring you guys more new stuff all the time. So, like I said, we appreciate your feedback and support. So until next time, I am Professor K.
And I'm Ed.
And we will see you next time.
Yeah.